Alrighty, we're going to get started with Unit 9. In Unit 9, Section 1, we're going to be talking about how to use a multiplicative inverse to solve an equation. So first, let's go ahead and define multiplicative inverse. Multiplicative inverse is a fancy word for something you've learned before, and that's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So go ahead and write that down. And when we multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, our product equals 1. So when we multiply by the multiplicative inverse, we're multiplying by the reciprocal, and we're still going to get a product of 1. So let's go ahead and look at number 1. We have 5/8 x equals 30. To make life a little easier, I'm going to rewrite my equation. So 5/8 x equals 30. Now, we know the reciprocal or multiplicative inverse of 5/8 is 8/5. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply each side by that. Remember, whatever I do to one side of the equation, I must do to the other. Here, my 8's cancel, my 5's cancel, so I'm left with x equals. Now I'm going to simplify this when I multiply. You know when you multiply by a whole number, you can simply rewrite that over 1. 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 36 times, and 6 times 8 is 48. So x equals 48 is my answer. Looking at number 2, I have -7/12 x equals 14. Now I'm going to rewrite this before we get started. So -7/12 x equals 14. I'm going to multiply by my multiplicative inverse, which in this case would be -12/7. Again, that negative sign comes with it. When I do that, everything cancels on this side. The 12's cancel, 7, and my negative signs cancel, so I'm left with x equals 14/1 times -12/7. 7 goes into 7 one time, into 14 two times. So then I'm left with 2 times -12, and that is simply -24. So x equals -24 is my answer. I'm going to leave number 3 for you guys to try. Whoops. There we go. I'm going to leave number 3 for you to try. You're going to do this the exact same way. However, it's written in reverse. So -24 equals -12/19 x. You're going to solve that the same way by multiplying by the multiplicative inverse. All right, let's go ahead and look at number 4. Number 4 is a two-step equation. So remember, we want to get x by itself in order to solve for x. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the 8 and subtract 8 from both sides. When I do that, my 8's cancel, and I'm left with 4/7 x equals 20. I'm going to multiply each side by 7/4, as that's my multiplicative inverse or reciprocal. When I do that, everything on this side cancels. I'm left with x equals 4 goes into 4 once, into 25 times. I'm left with x equals 35. Let's look at number 5. Again, this is a two-step equation. However, this time we're just dealing with fractions, but we're going to solve it the exact same way. So the first thing I'm going to do is get that half x by itself, and I'm going to add 1/4 to both sides. When I do that, that cancels, and I'm left with 6 1/4 equals half x. Now, I prefer to work with improper fractions when I'm multiplying fractions, so I'm going to change 6 1/4 to an improper fraction. When I do that, I get 25/4 equals half x. When I multiply each side with the multiplicative inverse, I multiplied each side by 2. When I do that, this simply cancels, and I'm left with x equals 25/2. In my final answer, I'm going to rewrite it back as a mixed number. So x equals 12.5. And that's my final answer. I'm going to leave number 6 for you to try. Remember, this plus a negative is the same thing as subtraction. So you've got a two-step equation there, and think about what the inverse of subtraction is when you are solving that. All right, we've got a word problem here, and it reads, the weight of a bull calf is 388 kilograms. If its weight increases at a rate of 1 2/5 kilograms per day, how long will it take the bull calf to reach a weight of 500 kilograms? Now, the way I'm going to set this up is I'm going to write the rate plus the current weight, and that added together equals my goal weight. So I'm going to look back to the problem to determine my rate. My rate is 1 2/5 per day. My current weight is 388 kilograms, and my goal weight is 500 kilograms. Now, I'm left with a simple two-step equation. So I'm going to first start out by using my inverse operation and subtracting 388 from both sides. When I do that, I'm left with 1 2/5 equals 112. I'm going to change 1 2/5 into an improper fraction. And I'm going to start working over here just for space. So I have 7/5 days equals 112. I'm going to multiply each side by 5/7 because that's my multiplicative inverse. When I do that, this is canceled, and I'm left with days equals 112 times 5/7. I can cancel the 7 to make it 1, and it goes into 112 16 times. 16 times 5 is then 80. So the time that it will take to reach that goal weight is going to be 80 days. All right, the next section is a set of review problems, solving inequalities, and then it asks you to graph your solution. I'm going to go ahead and show you number 1 just to track your memory. Again, we're going to solve this the same way as we would an equation with an equal sign. We just have an inequality this time. So I'm going to add 17 to both sides. When I do that, I have 2y equals 28. Then to solve for y, I simply divide by 2. And this equal sign, should be a greater than sign. So y is greater than 14. When I graph that, I'm going to put 14 on my number line. Because I have a greater than sign, I have an open dot, and we can show that it's greater than 14 by pointing it to the right. If it was greater than or equal to, I would have a closed dot, but greater than or less than are simply an open dot. All right, so hopefully that jogs your memory for inequalities. Go ahead and try number 2 and 3, and then you have one word problem at the bottom. Again, you must complete all review problems in addition to the problems that I would like you to try on your own before moving to your check-in.